Me at a la 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 la
Hey guys, it's Elena. So last week, one of my subscribers requested that I show you guys how to make a pleated tennis skirt. So you ask and I make. So I made a pleated tennis skirt this week. I'm going to show you everything that I did and you can make one too. Okay, so before you start actually cutting anything, you need to know how much to cut and how much fabric you actually need. So I have on the screen a rundown of the 3 measurements you'll need to take on yourself: hip, waist, and length. I have a few recommended measurements underlined, and then the rest of it is the formulas that you will use. So here's the template that makes this process a whole lot easier. So you will go ahead and download it. The cells highlighted in green are essential and you are required to input those. And then the cells that are not highlighted don't need to be changed, as I've already have recommended and standard measurements listed. But if you have specific preferences that you want to accomplish, you could go ahead and change those. And then the cells that are highlighted in red do not need to be filled in or changed, as they are calculated fields. Go ahead and put your measurements in. For example, I'll put mine in. Once you put them all in and hit enter, everything will auto-populate. So all the formulas used can be found on the prior sheet, so I won't really go into it, but just a few points is that the total fabric length is going to be super long just because it is a pleated skirt, which means that it requires a triple fold each pleat. So the length will have to be 3 times your waist plus seam allowance. Your waistband length will be a little bit longer than your normal waist, just because we need to add room for a buttonhole and some seam allowance. And the pleat section is where it gets interesting. So based on the number of pleats, you will need to have 3 identical sections per pleat. So if you were to be exact, this would be your number. However, it's a little bit hard to measure that out if it isn't really a nice round number. So you do want to try to get it as close as possible. So there are a couple things that you can do. I recommend changing the number of pleats to get a more measured friendly digit. Just be aware that if you round down to the 10th decimal, your skirt will come out a little bit smaller than expected. And if you round up, then you'll be cutting into your seam allowance. So that's why I recommend playing around with the number of pleats, or you can go ahead and change your waist measurement to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller if that works better. But best of all, the total minimum yardage needed is the number that you'll go to the fabric store with. Make sure that you are always rounding up and make it a number that is easy to be cut out. So mine was 2.6 yards, but I just went ahead and rounded up to 2.75, so that's what I got. Okay, so once you have all of that ready, now you can start cutting. I just went ahead and bought a cute light blue cotton fabric. And then here you can see I cut out 1 waistband and 1 skirt panel. Typically, we usually hem our garments last, but because we're doing so many pleats, I went ahead and did this first, just because I didn't want to do all that work to iron all my pleats in and then have to undo it just to put a hem in. So I did the hem first. I folded it up a 1/2 inch and then folded it up one more time, another 1/2 inch, ironed it, and then pinned it all along my big strip of skirt panel. And then I just did a normal straight stitch all along to really secure it. So this next step is super duper important. You want to first label and allow yourself to have a seam allowance on both ends of your fabric. So I left a 1/2 inch on both ends, and then you're going to mark with chalk or a pen and then I snipped it as well just to make it more obvious. Every pleat width that was calculated. So my pleat width was 1.55 inches. Mark your gauge the best you can and then go and mark it all the way down. Once you've done that, you're gonna kind of think about all of those ticks in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to match up 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4. So 1 and 3 are going to push together, and then 2 and 4 are going to push together, and then you can go ahead and pin it. Do that all the way down, and it should start to look kind of like pleats and will eventually look like an actual pleated skirt. Once you have pleated the top, it's time to do a similar practice on the bottom so that we can get our pleats nice and ironed and crisp. So of course we've already hemmed, so we don't want to snip, but go ahead and take chalk and measure down the same amount as you did before. In my case, 1.55 inches all the way down the bottom of your skirt, and then go ahead and pin it just like you did at the top. Once you have all your pleats pinned and they're all looking really nice and good, then you can go ahead and iron. This part is very important, so really take your time and make sure that everything is looking spick and span. Once your pleats have been sufficiently ironed, you are going to go ahead and take your pleat length plus your seam allowance, so in my case 5.5 inches, and measure down from the top of the skirt, and then you're going to take your hip pleat ease. In my case it was 0.4 inches. I went ahead and rounded up to 0.5 inches just to make my life a little bit easier. And as you can see, I am taking my gauge and lining it up with where that fold from the pleat indent is and popping it out 0.5 inches. So I'm basically making it so that I'm spreading out and fanning out the pleats a bit. So I'm spreading each pleat out 0.5 inches. Once you have gone and done that all the way around all of your pleats, go ahead and start sewing down. You want to do a very small seam allowance here along and sew down that pleat length, again 5.5 inches. So use a pin or something to mark the bottom of each pleat length, and then go ahead and sew down. Do make an effort to sew down each pleat the same direction, and that will reduce the risk of getting any like wrinkles or puckers or anything like that. After all of my pleats had been sewn down, I just went ahead and took a basting stitch and sewed them all flat just to make my life a little bit easier once it came time to attach the waistband. I went ahead, and by me, I mean my husband, also ironed at this point, and that really made a big difference. Once all the pleats have been taken care of, it is time to tackle the zipper. So I did an invisible zipper. I picked one up from the store. It was a little bit longer than I wanted, so I went ahead and shortened it. I have a video tutorial, and I will post it in the description box and have a little card at the top of the screen here. And I really walk you through step by step how to put in an invisible zipper. It's actually not as hard as it seems. So if you are looking for something a little bit more in depth, I have a tutorial there, and that might be really beneficial to you. But put your invisible zipper in, pin it to one side, and then pin it to the other side. Zip it up before you sew in anything just to make sure that it is all lined up, and then you can go ahead and sew it. Do make sure that you line your zipper up not all the way to the top because we still need some space to attach our waistband. So line your zipper up about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch below the top of your waistband. So now it is time to finally put together the last step, which is the waistband. So I just took out that waistband piece of fabric that I cut out at the beginning, and I also have a piece of interfacing that I picked up that is the same size, and I just went ahead and fused it together, and then I used pinking shears all along the edge just to make sure that it was all finished and wouldn't fray or anything. Go ahead and line up one of the corners with the edge of the zipper, and then right sides together, pin it all the way together. You will have some overlap on the other end of the other side of your zipper, but that is totally okay and is to be expected. Use a normal seam allowance and sew all along, again, right sides together. Once you've done that, go ahead and iron that seam allowance up, and that will make your life a little bit easier. Go ahead and fold down the top of that waistband about a 1/2 inch and make sure it's ironed really well, and then you're going to go ahead and fold it right sides together and sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance the tips of both sides and snip the corners so that when you fold it over, it is nice and pointy. Once you've done that to both sides, fold down the rest of your waistband and fold it down so that it is going past your previous seam about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch past, because we are going to use a technique called stitch in the ditch and that will make it look really nice and professional. So as you can see, I'm just going really nice and slow and stitching inside that previous seam ditch. And so from the front you don't see anything, and then from the back you can see that that waistband is all nice and attached. So that seam is totally completely hidden, and now our zipper looks really nice. And then you can go ahead and add a buttonhole, which I also have a tutorial for this. I have it linked down below and also have a card up in the corner so you can get more information on how to do that. Here we are, we have made it to the end, and it actually turned out really nice and cute. I'm so happy with how it turned out. The color coordination with the tennis court in our local area is on point. So I'm so happy that I ended up doing this. It was suggested to me. So if you guys have any other suggestions of things you'd like me to make, go ahead and leave a comment and I will get to it. I can hear a word you say, 'cause I don't care about your game. I just wanted you to see